The Secret Doctrine by Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, a facsimile of the original edition of 1888, printed by the Cunningham Press, Alhambra, California. Volume 1, Cosmogenesis. Part 2, The Evolution of Symbolism in its Approximate Order, with explanatory sections. Section 5, On the Hidden Deity, its Symbols and Glyphs. The Logos or creative deity, the quote, word made flesh, unquote, of every religion, has to be traced to its ultimate source and essence. In India, it is a protest of 1008 divine names and aspects in each of its personal transformations. From Brahma Purusha down through the 7 divine rishis and 10 semi-divine Prajapati, also rishis, to the divine human avatars. The same puzzling problem of the one in many and the multitude in one is found in other pantheons, in the Egyptian, the Greek, and the Chaldeo-Judaic, the latter having made Confucian still more confused by presenting its gods as euhemerizations in the shapes of patriarchs. The latter are now accepted by those who reject Romulus as a myth and are represented as living and historical entities. Verbum satis sapienti. In the Zohar and Soph is also the One and the Infinite Unity. This was known to the very few learned fathers of the Church who were aware that Jehovah was but a third-rate potency and no, quote, highest, unquote, God. But while complaining bitterly of the Gnostics and saying, quote, our heretics hold that pro pater is known but to the only begotten Son, who is Brahma among the rest, that is, to the mind, nous. Irenaeus never mentioned that the Jews did the same in their real secret books. Note, as Mula Prakriti is known only to Ishvar, the Logos, as he is called now by Mr. T. Sabaro of Madhya, see his Bhagavad Gita lectures. End of note. Valentinus, quote, the profoundest doctor of the Gnosis, unquote, held that there was a perfect Aion who existed before Bethos, or Buthon, the first father of unfathomable nature, which is the second Logos, called pro pater. It is thus Aion who springs as a ray from Ein Sof, who does not create, and Aion who creates, or through whom, rather, everything is created or evolves. For, as the Basilidians taught, there was a supreme God, Abhachach, by whom was created mind, as Mahat in Sanskrit, nous in Greek. From mind proceeded the word, Logos, from the word providence, or divine light rather. Then from it virtue and wisdom in its principalities, powers, angels, etc., etc. By these angels the 365 aeons were created. Among the lowest indeed, and those who made this world, he, Basilides, sets last of all the God of the Jews, whom he denies to be God, and very rightly, affirming he is one of the angels. See the same source. Here then we find the same system as in the Puranas, wherein the incomprehensible drops a seed, which becomes the golden egg, from which Brahma is produced. Brahma produces Mahat, etc., etc. True esoteric philosophy, however, speaks neither of creation nor of evolution in the sense the exoteric religions do. All these personified powers are not evolutions from one another, but so many aspects of the one and sole manifestation of the Absolute All. The same system as the Gnostic prevails in the sephirothal aspects of Ein Sof. Yet, as these aspects are in space and time, a certain order is maintained in their successive appearances. Therefore, it becomes impossible not to take notice of the great changes that the Zohar has undergone under the handling of generations of Christian mystics. For even in the metaphysics of the Talmud, the lower face, or lesser countenance, the microprosopos, in fact, could never be placed on the plane of the same abstract ideal as the higher or greater countenance, macroprosopos. The latter is, in the Chaldean Kabbalah, pure abstraction. The word, or logos, or dabar in Hebrew, which word through it becomes in fact a plural number, or words, da, ba, rim, when it reflects itself or falls into the aspect of a host of angels or sephiroth, quote, numbers, unquote, is still collectively one, and on the ideal plane of a naught, zero, a no thing. It is without form or being, with no likeness with anything else, says Frank in Die Kabbalah, page 126. And even Philo calls the Creator, the Logos who stands next God, the second God, and the second God who is his highest God's wisdom. Deity is not God. It is nothing and darkness. It is nameless and therefore called Ein Sof, the word Ayin meaning nothing. See Frank, Die Kabbalah, page 153. See also section 12, Theogony of the Creative Gods. The quote highest God, unquote, the unmanifested Logos, is its son. Nor are the most of the Gnostic systems which come down to us mutilated by the Church Fathers anything better than the distorted shells of the original speculations. Nor were they open to the public or reader at any time. That is, had their hidden meaning or esotericism been revealed, it would have been no more an esoteric teaching, and this could never be. Alone Marcus, the chief of the Marconians, 2nd century, who taught that deity had to be viewed under the symbol of 4 syllables, gave out more of the esoteric truths than any other Gnostic. But even he was never well understood, for it is only on the surface or dead letter of this revelation that it appears that God is a quaternary, to wit, the ineffable, the silence, the Father, and truth. In reality it is quite erroneous, and divulges only one more esoteric riddle. This teaching of Marcus was that of the early Kabbalists, and ours, for he makes of deity the number 30 in 4 syllables, which translated esoterically means a triad or triangle, and a quaternary or square, in all 7, which, on the lower plane, made the 7 divine or secret letters of which the God name is composed. This requires demonstration. In his revelation, speaking of divine mysteries expressed by means of letters and numbers, Marcus narrates how the supreme tetrad came down unto me, him, from the region which cannot be seen nor named, in a female form, because the world would have been unable to bear her appearing under a male figure, and revealed to him the generation of the universe, untold before to either gods or men. This first sentence already contains a double meaning. Why should a female figure be more easily borne or listened to by the world than a male figure? On the very face of it, this appears nonsensical. Withal, it is quite simple and clear to one who is acquainted with the mystery language. Esoteric philosophy, or the secret wisdom, was symbolized by a female form, while a male figure stood for the unveiled mystery. Hence, the world not being ready to receive, could not bear it, and the revelation of Marcus had to be given allegorically. Then he writes, when first the inconceivable, the beingless and sexless, the Kabbalistic Ein Sof, began to be in labor, that is, when the hour of manifesting itself had struck, and decided that its ineffable should be born, the first Logos, or Aeon, or Ion, and its invisible should be clothed with form, its mouth opened and uttered the word like unto itself. This word, Logos, manifested itself in the form of the invisible one. The uttering of the ineffable name, through the word, came to pass in this manner. He, the Supreme Logos, uttered the first word of his name, which is a syllable of 4 letters. Then the second syllable was added, also of 4 letters. Then the third, composed of 10 letters, and after this the fourth, which contains 12 letters. The whole name consists thus of 30 letters and of 4 syllables. Each letter has its own accent and the way of writing, but neither understands nor ever beholds that form of the whole name, no, not even the power of the letter that stands next to itself, to the beingless and the inconceivable. Note: Ishvara, or the Logos, cannot see Parabrahmam, but only Mula Prakriti, says the lecturer in the 4 lectures on Bhagavad Gita, See Theosophist, February 1887, end of note. All these sounds, when united, are the collective being-less, unbegotten, aeon. And these are the angels that are ever beholding the face of the Father, the Logos, the second God, who stands next God, the inconceivable, according to Philo. Note on the face of the Father, the 7 angels of the face, with the Christians. End of note. This is as plain as ancient esoteric secrecy would make it. It is as Kabbalistic, but less veiled than the Zohar, in which the mystic names or attributes are also 4-syllabled, 12, 42, and even 72-syllabled words. The tetrad shows to Marcus the truth in the shape of a naked woman, and letters every limb of that figure, calling her head Omega, her neck Phi, shoulders and hands Iota and Chi, etc., etc. In this Sephara is easily recognized the crown, Kether, or head, being numbered 1, the brain, or Chokhmah, 2, the heart or intelligence, Bina, 3, and the other 7 Sephiroth representing the limbs of the body. The Sephirothal tree is the universe, and Adam Kadmon represents it as Brahma represents it in India. Throughout, the 10 Sephiroth are represented as divided into the 3 higher, or the spiritual triad, and the lower septenary. The true esoteric meaning of the sacred number 7 is cleverly veiled in the Zohar. It was betrayed by the double way of writing in the beginning, or Bereshit, and Bereseth, the latter in the higher or upper wisdom. As shown by Mr. MacGregor Mathers in his Kabbalah, page 47, and in the Kabbalah of Mr. T. Meyer, page 233, both of these Kabbalists being supported by the best ancient authorities, these words have a dual and secret meaning. Bereshit bara Elohim means that the 6, over which stands the 7th Sephiroth, belong to the lower material class, or, as the Anther says, 7 are applied to the lower creation and 3 to the spiritual man, the heavenly prototypic or first Adam. When the Theosophists and Occultists say that God is no being, for it is nothing, no thing, they are more reverential and religiously respectful to the deity than those who call God a he, and thus make of him a gigantic male. He who studies the Kabbalah will soon find the same idea in the ultimate thought of its authors, the earlier and great Hebrew initiates, who got this secret wisdom at Babylonia from the Chaldean Hierophants, while Moses got his in Egypt. The Zohar cannot well be judged by its after translations in Latin and other tongues, as all those ideas were, of course, softened and made to fit in with the views and policy of its Christian arrangers. But in truth its ideas are identical with those of all other religious systems. The various cosmogonies show that the archaic universal soul was held by every nation as the mind of the demiurgic creator, and that it was called the Mother, Sophia, with the Gnostics, or the female wisdom, the Sephira with the Jews, Sarasvati or Vach with the Hindus, the Holy Ghost being a female principle. Hence, born from it, the Kurios, or Logos, was, with the Greeks, the God-mind, nous. Now Koros, Kurios, signifies the pure and unmixed nature of intellect, wisdom, says Plato in Critylus. And Kurios is Mercury, the divine wisdom, and Mercury is the Soul, Sun, Arnubius 6 and 12, from whom taught Hermes received this divine wisdom. Why then the logoi of all countries and religions are correlative in the sexual aspects with the female soul of the world, or the great deep. The deity from which these two in one have their being is ever concealed and called the hidden one, connected only indirectly with creation, as it can act only through the dual force emanating from the eternal essence. Note on creation. We use the term as one accepted and sanctioned by use, and therefore more comprehensible to the reader. End of note. Even Aesculapius, called the Saviour of all, is identical, according to the ancient classics, with Phthah, the Egyptian creative intellect or divine wisdom, and with Apollo, Baal, Adonis, and Hercules. See Dunlap's Mystery of Adonis, pages 23 and 95. And Phthah is, in one of its aspects, the anima mundi, the universal soul of Plato, the divine spirit of the Egyptians, the Holy Ghost of the early Christians and Gnostics, and the Akasha of the Hindus, and even, in slow aspect, the astral light. For Ptah was originally the god of the dead, he in whose bosom they were received, hence the limbus of the Greek Christians, or the astral light. It is far later that Ptah was classed with the sun god, his name signifying he who opens, as he is shown to be the first to unveil the face of the dead mummy, to call the soul to life in his bosom. See Masperos, Bulak Museum. Kneph, the eternal unrevealed, is represented by the snake emblem of eternity encircling a water urn, with its head hovering over the waters, which it incubates with its breath, another form of one and the same idea of darkness, its ray moving on the waters, etc. As Logos soul, this permutation is called Ptah. As Logos creator, he becomes Imhotpu, his son, the god of the handsome face. In their primitive characters, these two were the first cosmic duad, Nut, space or sky, and Nu, the primordial waters, the androgyne unity above whom was the concealed breath of Kneph, and all of them had the aquatic animals and plants sacred to them, the ibis, the swan, the goose, the crocodile, and the lotus. Returning to the Kabbalistic deity, this concealed unity is then Hebrew expression which equals the Greek topan, which equals aiperos, endless, boundless, non-existent. So long as the Absolute is within Ulum, the boundless and termless time, as such, Ein Sof cannot be the creator or even the modeler of the universe, nor can he be Aur, light. Note on Ulum. With the ancient Jews, as shown by Leclerc, the word Ulum meant only a time whose beginning or end is not known. The term eternity, properly speaking, did not exist in the Hebrew tongue, with the meaning, for instance, applied by the Vedantins to Parabrahm. End of note. Therefore, Ein Sof is also darkness. The immutably infinite and the absolutely boundless can neither will, think, nor act. To do this, it has to become finite, and it does so by its ray penetrating into the mundane egg, infinite space, and emanating from it as a finite God. All this is left to the ray latent in the One. When the period arrives, the absolute will expands naturally the force within it, according to the law which it is the inner and ultimate essence. The Hebrews did not adopt the egg as a symbol, but they substituted for it the duplex heavens, for translated correctly, the sentence God made the heavens and the earth would read, in and out of his own essence as a womb, the mundane egg, God created the two heavens. But the Christians have chosen as a symbol of their Holy Ghost the dove. Whosoever acquaints himself with the Merkaba and the Lagash, secret speech or incantation, will learn the secret of secrets. Lagash is nearly identical in meaning with Vak, the hidden power of the mantras. When the active period has arrived, from within the eternal essence of Ein Sof comes forth Sephira, the active power, called the primordial point, and the crown, Kether. It is only through her that the unbounded wisdom could give a concrete form to the abstract thought. The two sides of the upper triangle by which the ineffable essence and the universe, its manifested body, are symbolized. The right side and the base are composed of unbroken lines. The third, the left side, is dotted. It is through the latter that emerges Sephira. Spreading in every direction, she finally encompasses the whole triangle. In this emanation, the triple triad is formed. From the invisible dew falling from the high unitriad, thus leaving 7 sephiras only, the head, Sephira creates primeval waters, that is, chaos takes shape. It is the first stage towards the solidification of spirit which, through various modifications, will produce earth. It requires Kath and water to make a living soul, says Moses. It requires the image of an aquatic bird to connect it with water, the female element of procreation with the egg and the bird that fecundates it. When Sephira emerges like an active power from within the latent deity, she is female. When she assumes the office of a creator, she becomes a male. Hence, she is androgyne. She is the father and mother Aditi of the Hindu cosmogony and of the secret doctrine. If the oldest Hebrew scrolls had been preserved, the modern Jehovah worshipper would have found that many and uncomely were the symbols of the creative God. The frog in the moon, typical of its generative character, was the most frequent. All the birds and animals now held unclean in the Bible had been the symbols of the deity in days of old. It was because they were too sacred that a mask of uncleanness was placed over them in order to preserve them from destruction. The brazen serpent was not a bit more poetical than the goose or swan, if symbols are to be accepted à la lettre. In the words of the Zohar, the indivisible point, which has no limit and cannot be comprehended because of its purity and brightness, expanded from without, forming a brightness that served the indivisible point as a veil. Yet the latter also could not be viewed in consequence of its immeasurable light. It, too, expanded from without, and the expansion was its garment. Thus, through a constant upheaving, motion, final the world originated. Zohar 1, 20a. The spiritual substance sent forth by the infinite light is the first Sephira, or Shekinah. Sephira exoterically contains all the other 9 Sephiroths in her. Esoterically, she contains but 2, Chokhmah, or wisdom, a masculine active potency whose divine name is Jah, and Bina, a feminine passive potency, intelligence represented by the divine name Jehovah, which 2 potencies form, with Sephira the third, the Jewish trinity of the crown, Kether. These 2 Sephiroths, called Father, Abba, and Mother, Amona, are the Jewed or the double-sexed Logos, from which issued the other 7 Sephiroths. See Zohar. This first Jewish triad, Sephira, Chokhmah, and Bina, is the Hindu Trimurti. Note, in the Indian pantheon, the double-sexed Logos is Brahma, the creator, whose 7 mind-born sons are the primeval rishis, the builders. End of note. However veiled, even in the Zohar, and more still in the exoteric pantheon of India, every particular connected with one is reproduced in the other. The Prajapati are the Sephiroths. 10 with Brahma they dwindle to 7 when the Trimurti and the Kabbalistic triad are separated from the rest. The 7 builders, creators, become the 7 Prajapati or the 7 rishis in the same order as the Sephiroths become the creators, then the patriarchs, etc. In both secret systems, the one universal essence is incomprehensible and inactive in its absoluteness, and can be connected with the building of the universe only in an indirect way. In both, the primeval male-female, or androgynous principle, and their 10 and 7 emanations, Brahma Viraj and Aditi Vak, on the one part, and the Elohim Yehovah, or Adam Adami, Adam Kadmon, and Sephira Eve, on the other, with their Prajapati and Sephiroths represent in their totality first of all the archetypal man, the proto-logos, and only in their secondary aspect do they become cosmic powers and astronomical or sidereal bodies. If Aditi is the mother of the gods, Devamatri, Eve is the mother of all living. They are the Shakti, or generative power in their female aspect of the heavenly man, and they are all compound creators. Says a Gupta Vidya Sutra, in the beginning, a ray issuing from Paramartika, the one and only true existence, it became manifested in Vyavarkika, conventional existence, which was used as a vahan to descend into the universal mother and to cause her to expand, swell, bri. And in the Zohar it is stated, the infinite unity, formless and without similitude, after the form of the heavenly man was created, used it. The unknown light, that is darkness, used the heavenly form as a chariot through which to descend, and wished to be called by this form, which is the sacred name, Jehovah. Note on the unknown light, darkness. Says Rabbi Simon, companions, man as an emanation was both man and woman, as well on the side of the father as on the side of the mother. And this is the sense of the words. And Elohim spoke, "Let there be light," and it was light. And this is the twofold man. Auszüge aus dem Zohar, page 13 and 15. Light, then, in Genesis, stood for the androgyne ray, or heavenly man. End of note. As the Zohar says, in the beginning was the will of the king, prior to any other existence. It, the will, sketched the forms of all things that had been concealed but now came into view. And there went forth a sealed secret from the head of Ein Sof, a nebulous spark of matter without shape or form. Life is drawn from below, and from above the source renews itself. The sea is always full and spreads its waters everywhere. Thus the deity is compared to a shoreless sea, to water which is the fountain of life, in Zohar 3, 290. The seventh palace, the fountain of life, is the first in the order from above. Hence the Kabbalistic tenet on the lips of the very Kabbalistic Solomon, who says in Proverbs 9:1, "Wisdom hath builded her house, it hath hewn out its 7 pillars." Whence, then, all this identity of ideas, if there was no primeval universal revelation? The few points shown are like a few straws in a hayrick in comparison to that which will be shown as the work proceeds. If we turn to the most hazy of all cosmogonies, the Chinese, even there the same idea is found. Tsi-tsai, the self-existent, is the unknown darkness, the root of the Wuliang-shu, boundless age. Amitabha and Tien, heaven, come later on. The great extreme of Confucius gives the same idea, his straws notwithstanding. The latter are a source of great amusement to the missionaries. These laugh at every heathen religion, despise and hate that of their brother Christians of other denominations, and yet one and all accept à la lettre their own Genesis. If we turn to Chaldea, we find in it Anu, the concealed deity, the one whose name, moreover, shows it to be of Sanskrit origin. Anu, which means in Sanskrit atom, Aniyamsam Aniyasam, smallest of the small, is the name of Parabrahm in the Vedantic philosophy, Parabrahm being described as smaller than the smallest atom and greater than the greatest sphere or universe. Anagraniam and Mahatorvart. This is what George Smith gives as the first verses of the Akkadian Genesis as found in the cuneiform texts as the Lateras Coctyles. There also we find Anu, the passive deity, or Ensof, Bel, the creator, the spirit of God, Sephira, moving on the face of the waters, hence water itself, and here the universal soul or wisdom of the three combined. The first 8 verses read thus: 1. When above were not raised the heavens. 2. And below on the earth a plant had not grown up. 3. The abyss had not broken its boundaries. 4. The chaos, or water, Tiamat, the sea, was the producing mother of the whole of them. This is the cosmical Aditi and Sephira. 5. Those waters at the beginning were ordained, but 6. A tree had not grown, a flower had not unfolded. 7. When the gods had not sprung up, any one of them. 8. A plant had not grown, and order did not exist. This was the chaotic or anti-generic period, the double swan and the dark swan, which becomes white when light is created. Note: the 7 swans that are believed to land from heaven into Lake Mansarovar are in the popular fancy the 7 rishis of the Great Bear, who assume that form to visit the locality where the Vedas were written. End of note. The symbol chosen for the majestic ideal of the universal principle will seem little calculated to answer its sacred character. A goose, or even a swan, may appear unfit, no doubt, to represent the grandeur of the spirit. Nevertheless, it must have had some deep occult meaning, since it figures not only in every cosmogony and world religion, but even was chosen by the medieval Christians, the Crusaders, as the vehicle of the Holy Ghost, supposed to lead the army to Palestine, to wrench the tomb of the Saviour from the hands of the Saracen. If we are to credit Professor Draper's statement in his intellectual development of Europe, the Crusaders, led on by Peter the Hermit, were preceded at the head of the army by the Holy Ghost under the shape of a white gander in company of a goat. The Egyptian god of time, Seb, carries a goose on his head. Jupiter assumes the form of a swan, and Brahma also, because the root of all this is that mystery of mysteries, the mundane egg. See preceding section. One has to learn the reason of a symbol before one depreciates it. The dual element of air and water is that of the ibis, swan, goose, and pelican, of crocodiles and frogs, lotus flowers and water lilies, etc. And the result is the choice of the most unseemly symbols among the modern as much as the ancient mystics. Pan, the great god of nature, was generally figured in connection with aquatic birds, geese especially, and so were other gods. If later on, with the gradual degeneration of religion, the gods to whom geese were sacred became priapic deities, it does not stand to reason that waterfowls were made sacred to Pan and other phallic deities, as some scoffers even of antiquity would have it. See Petoni Satirica, 136. But that the abstract and divine power of procreative nature had become grossly anthropomorphized. Nor does the Swan of Leda show priapic doings and her enjoyment thereof, as Mr. Hargrave Jennings chastely expresses it. For the myth is but another version of the same philosophical idea of cosmogony. Swans are frequently found associated with Apollo, as they are the emblems of water and fire, sunlight also, before the separation of the elements. Our modern symbologists might profit by some remarks made by a well-known writer, Mrs. Lydia Maria Child. From time immemorial, an emblem has been worshipped in Hindustan as the type of creation or the origin of life, Shiva or the Mahadeva being not only the reproducer of human forms, but also the fructifying principle, the generative power that pervades the universe. The maternal emblem is likewise a religious type. This reverence for the production of life introduced into the worship of Osiris the sexual emblems. Is it strange that they regarded with reverence the great mystery of human birth? Were they impure thus to regard it, or are we impure that do not so regard it? But no clean and thoughtful mind could so regard them. We have travelled far, and unclean have been the paths, since those old anchorites first spoke of God and the soul in the solemn depths of their first sanctuaries. Let us not smile at their mode of tracing the infinite and the incomprehensible cause throughout all the mysteries of nature, lest by doing so we cast the shadow of our own grossness on their patriarchal simplicity. From Progress of Religious Ideas, Volume 1, page 17, et sequens. Next section is section 6, The Mundane Egg.